Welcome back to Rodfather Garage. Today, I'm again working on porting my E7 cylinder heads off of my Factory 5 Cobra. But before I start actually grinding, I thought it'd be a good idea to share some of the tips and tricks that I've learned using die grinders that we would use for porting and polishing something like this. This is the sort of thing that you have to learn over time. You have to spend a lot of time with a die grinder in your hand, grinding various things before you're going to get good at this. But to speed you along in this process, I'm going to share some of the things that I've learned by using these. And I've spent a lot of time on this. In high school, I worked in an auto body shop and I would spend hours grinding. And the old guy that taught me how to use a die grinder, as well as sanders and other body tools, he said, you have to do this for a very long time. You can learn some things up front, but spend hours and hours at this. You'll have to spend hours at this before you're good, but it's best to start out with some base knowledge so that you are doing it right from the start, or you're trying to do it right from the start. So this is a die grinder. This is not an expensive tool. They're available anywhere that you can buy tools. This is a carbide burr for cutting, this one's specific for cutting steel and in this case cast iron. There's other ones that are specific for wood actually, or for soft metals like aluminum. The difference is how the little cutting edges are made and how they're formed. You can hold this basically in any way. You can hold it up like this, you can hold it down like this, you can hold it in your left hand or your right hand. This one is air powered. This one here, this tool does the exact same thing, but this one is electric. If you don't have a compressor, this is a really good option. I have a compressor, but eventually it'll run out of air. It's not big enough to keep up on running this continuously for a really long time. Also, it's nice to have two of these because that way you're not constantly doing tool changes. So this one I have set up with carbide. This one I have set up to take cartridge sanding rolls. So this is very sharp and this can get away from you really fast, and you can rub your fingers on it when it's not moving and it won't really cut you. It's not sharp like that, but think about like a saw, any sort of a saw blade. You know, if you touch a hand saw when it's not moving, you might get a little prick on your finger. If you grab onto it when it's going back and forth, you're gonna do some real damage. So they are a little bit dangerous. The other dangerous part of this is what comes off of them, which for this, it's tiny little shavings that are extremely sharp, and they can get in your skin, and worse, they can get in your eyes. And I have been to the hospital more than once because I was using one of these and it threw a piece into my eye that got behind safety glasses. So wear the best safety glasses you have available, wear gloves. They're also really high pitched and make a noise that's really bad for your ears. So wear earplugs or hearing protection of some sort. So tricks I've learned. The first one is your hose, because even though this is a flexible hose, it's gonna cause this machine to point in certain ways. So think about where your hose is. If you're in a position where you're grinding up like this, having the hose go down and keeping it straight is gonna help you control the tool. If you're grinding down, which is a lot of what I'm doing, working on a bench here on a cylinder head, this thing's going up and it's trying to pull it down like that. So that's gonna make it harder for you to control it because you're working against this hose. So if you put the hose over your shoulder like that when you're on this side, over like that when you're on this side, now the hose is making the tool point in the direction that you want it to go. So tip number one. Tip number two is a lot of people, when they use these, they think that they have to keep their body very rigid in one spot, and that works for some people. It doesn't work for me. And they move the tool with their hands, which means all of the power and all the control is coming basically from your elbows and your wrists. The little old guy that taught me how to do body work, the first thing he taught me was sanding with a long file board. And he said, you don't stand in one spot and sand like this, right? It looks easy, but it just makes your arms sore. What he says is you want to move your whole body when you're sanding with the long file board. Same thing goes for this tool. So if you're grinding, say along a long piece of metal like this, don't hold your body rigid and try and go like this, right? Also, that creates an arc like that. which you often don't want to do. If you're trying to do something that's a curve, make a curve. If you're trying to do a straight line, keep your tool going in a straight line. So it works better is to actually move your whole body with this, and it can be a surprising workout sometimes, moving around with this. So if you're plunging, for example, you're going to be plunging down like that. If you're trying to, again, make a long straight line, you're going to move your body with the tool, moving your hips, moving your shoulders, move at the waist. That's going to give you more control of this tool. And the third thing to be really aware of is this thing has a fair bit of torque. So just like the motion that causes a car to do a wheelie, where the wheels are trying to push the car forward and the front of the car is coming up and it's making it rotate like that, this tool does the same thing. So like the wheels on your car, when it's spinning this way, if you have the bottom part, which is moving that way when it's spinning in this case, it's going to want to make the tool go that way, right? The chips are going to come off that way, just like your car doing a burnout. If the smoke's going that way, the car wants to go this way. So be very aware of what direction this tool is turning in relation to what you're working on. Because in a port, for example, where I'm porting inside of a hole, if I'm porting on the bottom side of the hole, the tool wants to go this way. If I'm porting on the top, the tool wants to go the other way, because the top of the tool is turning the opposite direction, obviously. So people who are not experienced with this tool, they'll try and stick it in a hole like in an intake port or an exhaust port, and it'll catch, and it'll start wanting to pull itself all the way around based on the direction the tool's going, and they'll go around and around and around, and that's a good way to make a big mess. The ports on my cylinder heads are a square. I don't want to go in a circle. I want to move them in a square. So be aware when you touch this, it's going to want to pull it away from the direction that it's turning. The other issue to remember on the direction that this turns is it's going to torque in the opposite way. So I said before that when you take off in your car, you know, a drag strip, for example, when the car wants to do a wheelie, the wheels are pushing the car forward, but that torque is also making it turn. So every time you hit the trigger on this, it's going to want to move all by itself. I don't have any air turned on right now, but when I hit this, it's going to want to move just from the torque of this thing starting up. So be very aware when you start this. So when you get this close to your material that you're going to work on, it's going to want to move. So either you have to be prepared for that and either counteract that just with muscle control and hold it really steady until it gets up to speed, or the other way is to start it spinning before you get down in there. So if I'm doing an intake port, I will usually start this tool spinning before I start going into the port. I don't stick this inside the exhaust port, for example, and then hit the trigger, because it might move on its own, and if I catch the side, I'm going to do like I said before and spin around inside and get caught, and I might make a mess and damage the piece I'm working on. The final thing I'll say on control of this is have a tool rest if you can, especially if you're new at this, and especially if you're like me. I'm not a bodybuilder. I don't have huge muscles to hold this tool steady all of the time. So when I'm working, I'll have, for example, my elbow here is on the bench. That gives me a lot more control than if my arms are up here. Now there's nothing to stop me moving. You know, or put your hand on top of something like this, right? And then move yourself down there. Obviously I'd be wearing gloves like when I'm using this tool, because I don't want that metal getting all over me. But yeah, got your gloves on, got your tool going, then start working. And get out there and do it. Do it a whole bunch. This isn't an expensive tool to buy to start. This is an incredibly versatile tool. You can do so much with these. There's different attachments you can get. You can make this into a cutoff wheel. You can make it into a grinder. You can make it into with a sanding drum like I showed before. Fantastic tools, but be safe and spend a lot of time grinding on something. For example, a cylinder head that isn't a very valuable one to learn on, and you'll very soon get proficient, and it's extremely rewarding to work on. So something I learned from working with guys that had been doing things a long time was an old guy told me, never set your air hose on the ground. Never try and set any tool on the ground unless you're working on the ground. If you're underneath the car pulling the transmission out on jack stands, yeah, you gotta lay your wrenches on the ground. If you're working on a cylinder head sitting on a bench and you want to change tools, don't drop this hose on the ground. That makes you have to bend over and pick it up. That's hard on your knees and your joint and your other joints. So when you have to sit this down, set it on the bench. When you have to pick it up again, it's on the bench. You don't have to bend over and pick it up. Little things like that, having a good organized work area. I've got a bench here with all of my tools on it, and I've got a bench here with the cylinder head I'm working on, so I don't have to walk around. This isn't a big garage, but I don't have to walk very far. I can just reach over. If I need my other grinder, it's here. If I need the wrench to change to a different cutter, wrench is right here. Those will stay here until this job is done, and then they'll get put back in the toolbox. Little things like that are gonna make it much more enjoyable to work in the garage, and when we enjoy working, we spend more time at it, we do a better job, and we end up with a better finished product. So watch the videos on me actually porting the heads. I'm really excited, I'm really enjoying this process, and I'm gonna be really excited when I get the car out on the track and see how much faster it goes.